It's live. I'm on. Everybody panic. I'm actually early. Clock says a 12:59, but I hit the 30-second timer instead of the 1-minute timer. So you get a few extra seconds of me. Nice to see you. Nice for you to see me. See you in chat, hear my voice. Some point I do want to get set up with some kind of way to leave messages. I've been looking at, there's an app to do it or a service, but I have to spend money, of course, right? Can't argue with that, but I have no budget, so I'm loath to spend money. I've been trying to think about ways to work around it. I'm not sure anyone wants to actually leave me voice messages, but I kind of think it would be nice to have. I don't know, folks can let me know. Hey, Elfbait, nice to have you here. I think it'd be nice for people to leave me messages. As much as I enjoy interacting with folks in the chat, I don't find that folks interact too much outside of it, and I would love to get more in between. As my cat is wheezing in the background, which you may not hear because I've got noise. The noise things might catch it. I'd love to get more stuff in between streams and whatnot that I could address and mine for topics. I thought maybe doing some kind of voice, having some kind of access to voicemail would help. Not sure. Haven't got it set up anyway, but let me know if that's something that you could see yourself using. Programming notes. Monday will be the first episode of the official Logan's Run project. So if you want to, obviously you can take part regardless if you watch the movie or not, but if you wanted to get caught up and watch or rewatch the film to get ready, this is it. Your final couple of days before we get going. The movie arrived for me earlier this week. I haven't watched it yet, but I will be watching it over the weekend, and I will be ready. So hopefully you'll be ready too. I'm really looking forward to it. I don't know if I'm just going to run through it every day. I might split it up, maybe make it every couple days, maybe even do it as a once a week thing. It's nice to hit other topics, avoid people getting burned out, keep everybody fresh, and of course give folks more time to catch up in whichever degree they need to catch up. But that's going to start on Monday. So if you're interested in that Logan's Run project, try to get ready. I do think that first episode will probably be somewhat of an intro and very high level. So you probably could get away with it. We probably won't start delving into a lot of details yet, though you never know how things may go. But that will start. We'll be up and running for that. That's all I have as far as things I might want to mention. And of course, if you want to give the stream a thumbs up, I'm going to try to do this at the beginning while you're thinking about it. Go ahead and do that. And if you're not subscribed, but you're in here and you say, hey, I like you. I like the way you walk. I like the way you talk, though you're not seeing me walking. You are hearing me doing a lot of talking. Subscribing is great. Then I've got Patreon, and I appreciate always my Patreon supporters. I don't say that enough, but I do. And coffee, whole bunch of ways you can support the channel if you'd like to. With all that out of the way, blah, blah, blah. Let's get down to brass tacks. Going into the OSR Reddit. I know it's really the OSR subreddit, but I just feel like it sounds a little bit weird when you say it. So I just call it OSR Reddit. But yes, the OSR subreddit. I pulled this up just a couple minutes ago, but let's just give it a good old refresh, because why not? Make sure we're seeing the latest and the greatest. We're on the hot tab, which is kind of how we've been doing it. We did spend, I think we did a week or so. I think one time I tried controversial. No, maybe I did top. That worked okay. But I kind of like hot. Hot seems to work all right. And of course, as I'm scrolling through here, if you happen to be in here live, one of the great things you can do, you can participate. You can earn a participation badge. Call something out. If you see something that I've passed over that sounds interesting to you, I'm not all seeing, all knowing. Oh, here's a good one. This one should be good for thought, controversy. What is a good DM? Do they even exist? It's all an illusion. All right, this was posted by Grimnir's Goose. First of all, give an upvote to your fellow Redditors. Let's see what Grimnir's Goose has to say. The subject, as I just said, was what is a good GM? Good GM being in quotes. Do they even exist? I think it's pretty easy to tell when someone just isn't very good at running a session. That's all of us at some stage of our DMing careers. But I think it's really hard to say when someone is a good GM, in quotes, without it being extremely subjective. Though we, and definitely myself, do it all the time. I've seen people who I think are amazing DMs struggle to entertain a table of people who are not engaged and just glued to their phones. Then, on a different night with a different group of people, I've seen them hit it out of the park. I hate the DMing style of Matt Mercer, but literally millions of people would disagree with me. I guess what I'm really asking, in a very rambling way, is do people think there is a universal style or type of GM we should try to emulate? Or is a good DM someone that people at their table think is good at that time? I've heard universal DM advice given out that you should, quote unquote, never railroad the players, only to be met with yawns and blank faces when I've asked the players, what do you do? Some people would rather just be fed a story. Anyway, I'm just interested in people's opinions. And then there's an edit saying that, hey, thanks guys, great responses all around. I guess I overlooked the social aspect of DMing, which is an important skill in itself that you can work on or get better at. We can read some of the responses. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a social impact. I think, look, you go ask anybody whether they like movies, you're talking about TV shows, books, plays, poetry, anything. There is hardly anyone who is universally beloved. Maybe universally respected, but you're going to find detractors. That Shakespeare guy, hack. Robert Frost, hate him. Everyone, you're going to find everyone. So I don't think there is one. I don't think there is a universal person. In terms of GM advice, since I spend a fair amount of video time dispensing advice or at least ideas, you got to chalk it up to best practices, right? Here are things that I think work a lot of the time, or things to avoid most of the time. Does it mean there aren't exceptions? No. Does it mean there are times when something that I might say, hey, this is a bad idea, that will work? Sure, there probably are. I think, and you see a lot of this. I really don't like it as a rule. I would call it arguing from exceptionalism, which somebody might say railroading is bad, right? And they'll throw up the exceptions as if the person saying railroading is bad was saying that it is in 100% of 100% of cases, regardless of context or anything else, a bad idea. No, really what's being said is under most circumstances, with most groups, it's probably not a good idea. Are there groups out there for whom railroading might be necessary for them to be engaged and have a good time? Sure. Does that mean it's a great idea and something you should build your practice around? Probably not. It's more like, here's what's common practice and what we've decided over 40 or 50 years of playing the game are generally good things to do. If you want to do something else, just understand the pitfalls of going that direction, know your group, but then do it. If all that stuff matches up, do it. As far as who it is, GMs, whether they're good GMs, sure. But they're also, I would say, maybe most of our we should say, there are good GMs for certain groups. There probably is not the universal GM who will work for everybody. Just as they said, they hate the GMing style of Matt Mercer, but millions of people would disagree with you. Though those millions of people haven't actually played with Matt Mercer. And it's one thing to watch them play and enjoy it. It's another thing to maybe you enjoy it as a player. And we don't know. I'm kind of neither here nor there on Matt Mercer myself. It's fine. There's some things about his style that I don't love, but that might be me. As a player, I might really get into it. As a player, I might hate it. Even if I loved watching Critical Role, I might actually get into the game and it might turn out, oh gosh, this is much better to watch from outside than it is to play. Bob Mosdell hitting the chat. Hey, Bob Mosdell says, I like the quote-unquote role-playing as a conversation philosophy, and thus I'd say good DMing is purely subjective. Lots of factors go into any particular session, and, well, it's usually a group of people, so, right. And I'm just reaching over here to close my window. I don't know if you guys can hear the drilling that's happening outside, but that drill is going straight from across the street into my brain. Not fun. Not fun to hear. It's like being at the dentist office, even though I'm in my own home. It's a nightmare. Hopefully it wasn't coming across in my audio, but if it was, I apologize. Apologize for that, but I've shut the window. As far as Bob Monsdell's point about good GMing, yeah, I would tend to agree with that. It is definitely going to be subjective. I think there are things that we can look at and say, hey, these things tend to be good, these things tend to be bad. Same which we might do with any kind of criticism. Again, going back to art criticism, literary criticism, any kind of criticism, you can look at it and say, oh, these things are things that we think as with a critical eye are good, but they don't always work for us personally. You can look at a poem, you can break it down and say, wow, the meter is wonderful. The rhymes or lack thereof are impressive. The word usage is incredible, but the poem just doesn't speak to me as a whole. And someone else says, oh, this is the poem, makes me cry every time I read it because it just speaks to my life so much. Bob Monsell says, nope, no drilling, no voices. Okay, good to know. But I'm still going to keep that window closed, at least until I feel like the drilling has stopped, because, yeah, that's going to drive me batty. Well, let's see what some of the great comments that Grimnir's Goose got. Dime Store DM, give him an upvote, says, I think that trying to find a great example of a GM to emulate is a mistake and will lead to stagnation. Take the quote-unquote Mercer effect as an example. New players expect GMs to be like Matt Mercer, and this leads to some disappointment, as I'm pretty sure most GMs don't have writing staffs and studio setups. No, everyone has their own take and their own style, just like professional writers, movie directors, video game companies. The key to a great GM is a table full of enthusiastic players. When I was first playing D&D with my friends from school, we started with 2nd edition, and we didn't understand all the rules. Concepts like Railroad and Sandbox didn't exist. It was the mystery and the hilarious situations, the corny role-playing, the deaths and triumphs that remain my most vivid memories. Players are having fun, are invested in the game, then 99% of the time they don't give a crap if you're a master storyteller or an amazing improv actor or an incredible architect of fantasy worlds. Their best memories will be the people they play with and the stories they share. Yes, I agree pretty much with all of that. And I actually think, as I've said on different occasions, I think that I'm always, not only am I skeptical of the GMs who try to sell themselves as I am a professional writer or master storyteller or master world builder, not only am I skeptical of those claims when people say them, it actually makes me extremely wary of whatever it is. I probably would, if I was looking for a game and I was going through listings and LFGs, those would be the ones that I would skip if I had a choice. Unless I live somewhere where those are absolutely the only people who are running games, I would skip those, because I feel like those are the things that actually will set you down. Thinking that those are the most important features of GMing actually sets you down the wrong pathway. But yes, how do you know you're a good GM? Your players are having fun. What makes you a good GM is you are having fun and you are facilitating them having fun, so that the entire table is having fun. Whatever that means for your table is whatever it takes to be a great GM. That's pretty much it. Let's see. Let's just hit a couple more of these. Non-Dairy Giant says, a good GM is like a good friend or partner, and that one size does not fit all, and it's more about compatibility, compromise, and adaptation. That's also would be great. I think great advice. And then the last one I'll cover here, because I think everyone's saying good things. Nothing really controversial in any of these takes. Dr. Rotwang said, a good DM/GM/ref/keeper/etc. is that person who, when you are sitting down for their game, makes sure that you're having the best time possible. Ideally, they do this consistently. There's no single quote-unquote best style for the craft, and yes, it's a craft, just as there's no best style for directing a movie or playing a song or painting a picture or writing a novel. There's only trying your best to do your best, acknowledging that not every player will dig the way you do it, and enjoying it while you do it. That's what a good GM does. And then Garrett the Greek, the geek, not the Greek, adds in, I think, an important qualifier that this applies equally to all players, not GMs. As far as I'm concerned, GMs are playing too. Yeah, I where I tend to sort of branch off is as a GM, I don't go through trying to look at every player. And I know this is, I don't want to say controversial, but I certainly think there's this branch of GMing that has gotten more and more popular as time has gone on with it's up to the GM to spotlight and make sure every player is having fun. So I'm supposed to go with my 3 players tonight. Say, okay, are you having fun? Make sure you're having fun. Make sure you're having fun. Make sure you're having fun. That's not the route that I take. My route is this. The game is fun. Hopefully you are playing the game because you find the game fun. So me running the game in the best way or the way that I believe it's supposed to be played or should be played is fun. Therefore, you guys in engaging with that will have fun. Right? In a similar way, we might say, hey, we're gonna play softball or dodgeball or kickball, any kind of sport. I don't need to tailor the game of kickball. Okay, this guy likes it like this, so I'm going to make it for him. And we're going to play kickball. And if I play kickball and I'm not a jerk playing kickball and I don't make it unfun to play kickball, then the fact that we all enjoy playing kickball means we're all going to have fun playing kickball. That's kind of my take. But I almost feel like it's almost a hot take at this point because I'm just not this concept of I got to spotlight everybody and it's up to me to do this kind of ensuring fun for every specific participant. I don't go for that. But that could just be me. Bob Mostel taking over the chat today says, I think you hit a point there too. Most of us have been limited by access to the one forever GM in our group, and that's it. Yes, that certainly happens. Ideally, you can play with many different people and experience many different styles. Yep, that's also true. Continuing, but that's another thing. There's a difference between playing with friends and playing with strangers at, for example, a convention. Yes, and that's one experience I don't have. I've actually never played a convention game, either as a player or as a GM. I was kind of thinking I would get to do that, and then COVID hit, kind of derailed my I don't say dreams, but my capabilities and just my availability to do that. I'm still hoping. I don't want to say in the post-COVID, but as things become more normalized under COVID or with COVID, we sort of figure things out long-term, how the world's going to work now. I'll be able to do that. Bob Moss also says fun. Now there's another objective term. Yep. And yes, I got you, meaning now. Right. Yeah, there's a lot of objectivity thrown in there. My only thing is I don't go for the spotlighting thing. And I think there's a big focus, which I think puts an unfair, I should probably do a video on it. I think it puts a bit of an unfair pressure on the GM, this idea you have to spotlight everybody. I think, like with playing any sport or doing anything, if you like jigsaw puzzles, we'll work on jigsaw puzzles. And if I'm not a jerk and I don't try to, alpha game the jigsaw puzzle or whatever, then we should have fun playing jigsaw puzzles. I have to turn to you and try to make it more fun for you. If you like jigsaw puzzles, the act of doing it is the fun. And that's kind of that's sort of the path I try to take with role-playing games. Alrighty, what's next? I upvoted that because that's GM Fred, friend of the channel, who posted about creating a monoclass or going with a monoclass in Lamentations of the Flame Princess. I already gave it an upvote. I don't think I have much to say about it. Elfbait said that WebDM did a video on the tyranny of fun. Yeah, that's definitely something I've gotten into. I think a video I did that maybe came closest to that was essentially I had a video, and you could find it on the channel, was basically, it's everybody's job to have fun. It's not the GM's job to somehow be above or beyond the rest of the players and make sure that they all have fun. It's everybody should be doing that. Everybody should be playing the game with keeping in mind, am I stopping somebody else from having fun? Much like you would with anything else you do, right? If you play Monopoly with someone and they're a jerk playing Monopoly, you don't want to play Monopoly with them anymore, or whatever it is. Though I get it that games like Monopoly tend to make everybody jerks to a certain degree. But I think if I play the game in a way that highlights what's fun about the game and the people find that fun, then everyone's just going to have fun. I don't need to go out of my way to try to pump up your fun. And that just adds a lot of work. Too. And then what if I get it wrong? What if I think somebody's fun is one way and it's not? Okay, here's something else. I kind of must have missed this as I'm original scrolling here. This is posted by Prawn108. Kindling that magic feeling that has been lost to culturalist D&D. It's theory. We're getting into theory. Gotta be theory. And Elfbait adds, there are also those people who like to try to push their fun. Yes, and that's another thing to be aware of that I've seen a lot. I think I even have that as a topic that I want to talk about at some point soon, is this concept of, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to push your own version of what's fun, or are you trying to allow people to have fun whichever way they like? And that comes up quite a bit, right? GMs will say, I think actually I covered that a little bit in one, right? DMs saying, I want you to play this way. This is the way I want you to have fun. This is what I think is fun. I want lots of role playing. But if the player doesn't want to do a lot of role playing, how does that work, right? It's easier just to allow people to have fun however they want to, as long as it's not to the detriment of everybody else. All right, this might be meaty. Posted by Prawn108, kindling that magic feeling that has been lost to cultureless D&D. Here we go. I'm sure a big part of it is in the difficulty and countering 4/5e's insourcing of all power to the character sheet rather than acquiring more unique forms of power through adventuring. I feel like in many ways the rules perspective of this issue is a major focus of OSR from what I've seen. Correct me if I'm wrong. Superheroitis is one of many causes related to the symptom I'm trying to discuss, but it isn't the heart of it. One thing that I've heard from players of the old ways is that it isn't focused so much on your one single character. People were much more accepting that they could lose characters because they knew that they had recruited a dozen NPCs and could simply drive the first officer now that the captain is dead. It has less to do with the fact that death is common and old schoolers, quote unquote, get over it and move on, and more that the game simply isn't focused around one single atomic group of 5 irreplaceable characters. When you roll a trash character, maybe you could still use them to coordinate and collect a posse of superior NPCs and spend months of in-game time prepping and learning about your foes and trying to acquire blueprints of their lair, maybe hire a spy to get in there and dig dirt on their weaknesses and spread infighting in their ranks. Non-character sheet related possibilities. And when he dies, you've already met his replacement multiple times over. Having more than one character is the first strength of this style, and the second strength is world persistence, bolded. I almost said campaign duration, but this is subtly different. Modern campaigns follow the storyline of said atomic anime heroes. When the storylines of those characters are done, or more likely, boredom disguised as scheduling conflicts, the campaign ends and the world ceases to exist. In the multi-character style game, you leave yourself open to a constantly shifting cast of characters. You can focus on playing the new recruits one day and the leaders the next. You can decide you want to see how any minute detail plays out, or zoom out and follow a longer timeline or a macro-scale war. Each player can control characters with their own personal goals that can overlap but differ from their main character, if such a thing even exists. You could totally drop your main focus of characters at any time, for months even, and start up another group that has to live in the same world where the deeds of the previous PCs have already shaped the world. The persistence of one unified world where multitudes of PCs have influenced the world and created tons of secrets and lores, and where players themselves can join or leave and the world persists onwards, creates the very depth that movements like OSR are meant to create. At the end of the day, I feel like this concept might be more important than which system is chosen. Even 5e can be a dangerous world with simple rules changes. What it takes for it to become something special is a long-term world with deeper player interaction beyond the scope of a single group of dudes on a mission. Now, I'm not saying that their heart isn't in the right place. Mr. or Mrs. or they. I don't know. We need some more pronouns. And I'm not up on what the pronouns should be, but referring to Prawn108, but I think they're confusing a few things. Especially modern OSR it's no longer a singular concept. Because partly what we're talking about here is, we would call it these days a West Marches style campaign, where you have a world and you have potentially a large cast of characters who are coming and going. And certainly you can do that in the OSR. There's nothing preventing you from running this exact same game in 5th edition. I do think there is something to the fact that in 5th edition, it takes a while to build characters, and the act of building them naturally leads to a greater attachment, which means not only do you not want them to die, and look, I get that part of it. Okay, if you spend 10 minutes creating a character and they get unlucky and die 10 minutes into the game, you haven't really invested more time in the character than you did in the game. Okay, no big deal. Go create another character. The party probably hasn't even really made it out of the village, so you could just still. They're only at the they're at the moat house or whatever in Hamlet. They haven't even left yet. So by the time you make a new character, you can just run over there and catch them. They're still there. If you're in 5th edition, have you spent hours or days creating a character and then they die in 10 minutes? And during those hours and days, you've gotten a real attachment to them. And the community often engenders this idea, not only what the character's like today, but thinking about their advancement through levels, some all the way to 20 sometimes. And when that character dies, if they do in the first 5 minutes, 10 minutes of the game, it's much more of a gut punch. But, that's just kind of the way it is. I don't think it's necessarily the rules of 5th edition, though I think the rules help with that. I think it's also the mentality of players that play 5th edition. I think just when you look at people who play a lot of Pathfinder, and I'm talking more here 1st edition because I really don't know much about 2nd edition Pathfinder to the extent that I know any of them. They're really into that character generator kind of system of min-maxing and doing that. Not everybody, but I think a fair amount. And that's part of the game, and you want to have some time to see that. But plenty of people play OSR games that are not West Marches. Plenty of people will play games in which they trying out new systems, trying out new settings. Oftentimes in OSR games, as much as anywhere else, the setting is kind of baked into the system. So you pick up In the Odd or Electric Bastion Land, and that kind of has a setting. So if you want to play those rules, you might throw them into your existing campaign, or just as likely, you're going to start a Electric Bastion Land campaign, or you're going to do that with Troika, or you're going to do that with another game. It's not like 5th edition doesn't have a baked-in setting. It's got Forgotten Realms, which has all the features as far as world persistence that you're asking for. You can have multiple players running through Forgotten Realms. You've got all kinds of stuff you can pull from. You can certainly, as part of your world-building efforts within the Forgotten Realms, you can play that. So there's some confusion, I think, in here of merging a few things together. Certainly when you look back at OSR when it was not OSR, but it was just role-playing game, there was definitely a lot of support for playing that. It wasn't called the West Marches style. It was just kind of called, I guess, gaming group style. I'm not sure, as opposed to maybe convention style. I think a lot of gaming groups, and you could find some examples of the wonderful newsletters they would write where they were playing what we would now call West Marches, having large groups of players playing in lots of different dungeons. We don't know from them, or at least the ones I've read, they don't necessarily say what the players were thinking when their characters died. But at a certain point, if you were able to get a whole bunch of different characters, even if your first level character died, you could probably get them resurrected because you probably have a higher level guy that's got the money, whatever, to go and resurrect them if you wanted to. But you might think at first level the resources aren't worth it, and maybe this guy didn't that, so maybe it's okay. So I think they're maybe merging things together, and this is, I guess, where I also say is kind of a problem with the OSR is because it means so many different things to so many different people. I try to think of OSR really just in the mechanics of it. And I had a video, what is the OSR in 2021? You can, if you want to check that out, where I really tried to hone in on, I just want to look at mechanics. I look at people's emotional feelings. I don't want to look at, because you get these kind of things. Like for this person, OSR is West Marches, persistent worlds, multiple characters, and I guess, and they throw in deadliness, but that doesn't have to be true of the OSR. Certainly, it's not true of a lot of different OSR games. One or more of those is not going to fit. You're not going to tick that box with a few different systems, and certainly it comes down to as much your GMing style, your table style, however he thinks about it, than the actual OSR. I'll be curious to read the comments, and looks like there are some comments that we can read. I did give them an upvote. It's an interesting take, but I think that they are conflating a bunch of different things into this sort of their version of what OSR is, but that's not necessarily what everybody's agreed upon as the OSR. But for them, like they titled it, this is what gives them their feeling of magic. And I do think that maybe if there's one strength of the OSR is that it is flexible, that you can really find whatever is magical to you and run with it. That can be easier. You don't necessarily have to fight against the rules as you might need to do in something like 5th edition, just because it is crunchier. So it's more bound. It's got more tentacles that are bound to a certain play style that are harder to untie, unravel, and unstick than in simpler systems. Let me see what the chat's got to say. Elfbay says, isn't that essentially what Wes March's style play is? Yeah, that's right. That's definitely true. Hey, Frederick Ork says, everybody says Wes March's, but they really know what a Wes March's game is. I have seen some confusion over Wes March's, but I think the big things, at least in the way I'm using it, is this concept of multiple players, multiple characters playing in a shared world. And there were other parts of Wes March's, like it's ideally supposed to be player-led scheduling, and it's really supposed to be player-led in many ways. You're supposed to tell the GM where you're going, when you can play, removing that kind of scheduling thing off of the GM, meant to be kind of open table. But the term is sort of inflated, I think, from when it had a more specific set of, I don't know, guidelines than it does now. But the big thing I'm looking at here is the world persistence, open table, open character nature of Wes March's. Whoops. No. Elfbait says, our games in the 80s weren't super deadly and they were full of roleplay and story. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing, right? That's why I've seen OSR be compared and contrasted with what other people will call old school, because there is a difference between what OSR is seen as now by people who may have never played it back in the day, and most of them haven't. And maybe those of us who played it when we were kids, or depending on how old we are, when we were adults already and we're playing it. And I'm sure there's differences between those of us who played it as kids back in the day and those who played it as adults back in the day. Because certainly when I'm 8, 10, 12, and I'm playing RPGs, it's not the same kind of attitude I had when I was playing it in college, and certainly not now. Yeah, I mean, we didn't kill off tons of characters. I think it just was part of the game. Everyone had fun, and I think there was something to wanting to go and be triumphant. And not be a meat grinder into the first couple of caves in the Caves of Chaos. You wanted to beat it. And I think even the GMs were kind of in on that game when they weren't maybe trying to outright kill us for the humor of it. And what about the East marches anyway? Bob Mostel says. Yes, Bob Mostel, I don't know. You got East, North, South marches. There are all kinds of marches out there. Juan Cholo, hey Juan, says, I see OSR as rulings over rules and rules light. Using that, you could play emergent characters in Hexcrawl. You could play storyline, linear campaigns. Yeah, right? I mean, that's another way of doing it. But there are certainly game systems that are rulings over rules and rules light that are not OSR, right? So, or that maybe a lot of other people could look at Powered by the Apocalypse games and would say that they fit both of those things. We wouldn't consider that OSR. But that certainly is part of it. And that's, I think, part of the interesting part of OSR, but it also makes that confusing part, because they didn't even talk about really in here Prawn 108. I don't think they really mentioned the rulings over rules, or kind of the rules, how much rules there are. And certainly there were old school games that were very crunchy. If you use the entire DMG in first edition AD&D, that's really crunchy to me. And there were other very crunchy games that are OSR, but the OSR as a movement has gone in that rules light direction for the most part. It says, I killed, insert God's name, this weekend. Yeah, I mean, that was, and I mean, look, they rued the day that they put out D&Ds and demigods with actual stats for deities. They should have just known off the bat that was automatically going to send people running off to kill every god, every demon that they can get a hold of, which they did. 5e is rulings over rules. I don't know if I'd go that far. 5e is a lot about, general, was it specifics over general? Maybe is how I put it, with a bunch of general rules and a bunch of that exceptionalism in the rules, right? Where you're creating individual exceptions for different general rules. Frederick Ork says, I was lucky in that I had access to a lot of different RPGs and groups. I remember playing Shadowrun one night and Ars Arcana the other night. Another night. Yeah, I never got quite that far. I used to buy, I still do, buy a lot of games that I buy them on the hopes I'll get to play them. I did get to play a little bit of Shadowrun back in high school. I don't know which edition it was, first, second, somewhere early on. Didn't get to play it enough. I loved what I played about it. I didn't. It's one of those things that I didn't, which I think it really occurs to most people. Something can happen is you get in these bubbles of being in the OSR Reddit or just being in the tabletop role-playing game Reddit or Facebook groups or anything, and you're talking to the people who are obsessed, are in probably the 0.001% of people who are really obsessed with all the minutiae. Most people outside of that, they don't care. And I think people get so caught up in how come they're not addressing what we as the 0.001% think. And you can say what you want about various imbalances in games like Shadowrun, but the vast majority of people are just gonna they like the way it plays, they're gonna play it, or they're gonna put it down and not play it, and they probably won't even analyze to any degree to get down to that kind of detail of why they didn't like it or why they liked it, or we just put up with it, or we just changed it. Yeah, we didn't like the way that hacking worked in Shadowrun, so we just did something else. People just do that and run with it. But you get into these forums, and it can become full of tempests in teacups. Not to say that there aren't issues you shouldn't try to fix, or I'm not saying that because I get involved in them as well, but that keeping that perspective is handy. Elfbait says 5e often leaves things left for the players and DM to decide. I kind of think that as far as mechanically, I think it's often as to which rule to use, try to drill down into which is the specific rule, which general was overruling, or does it overrule a general rule? And the other one might be that rules as intended versus rules as written. And I don't know where that, I'm sure there's always been some debate, but I usually go with, hey, look, what is the rule intended, right? What's the spell intended to? And I know it's not just a 5th edition thing. I really think part of it is just how we've evolved as a community. Because I've gotten in the same kind of arguments or discussions with people talking about 5th edition with, I think it was at the time we were playing Lamentations of the Flame Princess. And then because it was someone who maybe was looking at the game more the way folks at 5th edition look as, let me look at how a spell is written out. And not just take it in the way that, look, you can know it's a first level spell. We know what a first level spell is kind of intended to do. I think if you ask somebody on the street, hey, what's the spell meant to do? But there's a certain player type, which probably has started maybe with 2nd edition, certainly with 3rd edition, right? The part of that min-maxing is, how can I take the spell as written and start looking for what doesn't it say? Well, it doesn't say I can't, therefore I can kind of approach. And it creates this attitude where you have to write everything like it's legalese, which people complain about in 5th edition. But I can guarantee you, when I had to go back and essentially establish a legalese definition of this particular spell so that I could clarify everything, it reads worse probably than whatever spell you would use as an example in 5th edition. And that's simply because someone kept trying to find the loophole, as if the spell description, that's how it's supposed to be done, as opposed to just knowing, look, it's a first level spell that does a very limited thing. No, it's not going to give you the laundry list of everything it doesn't do, because it says pretty clearly what it does. So stop trying to turn it into all the things it doesn't do and just accept it, kind of thing, which I felt like back in the day, it was just kind of, okay, we accept it. But that might just be me and my group, and there might have been groups that had large fights over what particular spells did. Well, it doesn't say it doesn't do that. Therefore, can I slice this person in half with it? No. You can't, because it's a first level spell and it doesn't say that in a positive way. So we shouldn't, it not saying it that it positively can't do it doesn't mean that it can do it. LP mentions Rollmaster. Juan Cholo comes in with ADD was super crunchy, to be honest, especially if you used Unearthed Arcana also. Yes, AD&D is kind of a really interesting case. If you just look at the core of the system, it really is, it's the 3 brown books plus Greyhawk, plus a little bit of tweaking stuff, mostly to try to get it different enough from the 3 brown books to get away to separate Arneson from it, to get Arneson out as an author. And it didn't work because I think Arneson sued them, and TSR lost the lawsuit, so Arneson continued to get credit and I guess whatever royalties. But that's essentially the base, the core of AD&D is that. But and I forgot if they mentioned it in Playing by the World, which is an awesome book about the whole history of these role-playing games. But I got the sense that the DMG was Gygax taking the 7, 8 years worth of people asking questions, dragon articles, also trying to standardize things for convention play and playing with modules and playing with what we would now call Adventures League, but playing those sorts of organized play groups. They start to want to standardize everything, and you gather up all these kind of house rules and things that people would keep asking for over and over again. Different groups keep reinventing the wheel over and over again, and so you just say, listen, I'm just going to give it to you, whatever, and I've mentioned this before as an example. Drowning, right? Drowning comes up often enough people are asking me, or enough people are creating their own weird and very idiosyncratic drowning rules. You know what? I'm just going to create a set of drowning rules, and that's how you get from rulings to rules. And it makes sense. If you're running into a ruling all the time, you're going to codify it in a rule. Why wouldn't you? You don't need to make a separate ad hoc ruling every time. And as you build those up, you end up with rules. And so you end up with a DMG. And if you follow the whole DMG, which I never did, and no group I played with ever did, but apparently people did, yeah, that's a super, super crunchy system to me. Anyway, at least it's about as far as crunchy as I would ever want to get. Frederick Ork says 5e does that because it was based on old Skewel play. Dave Mills chiming in. What's up, Dave Mills? Thanks for joining. Frederick Ork says, my biggest pet peeve is the GM that will not kill. I will just make a new character. It is not the end of the game. Yeah, another, I guess a whole other different thing, right? But that's something that, it's that table style, because some players don't want to lose their characters either. And you see it on Facebook and other places where people will chime in, I don't want my character to die. And you think about it as a GM, what do I do? What do I do with that? How do I threaten you? But you got to work that out as a table. That is definitely a style. And some GMs don't want to hurt people's feelings. They don't want to make upset. And frankly, some players do get very upset over it. My daughter gets super upset. She's very competitive, and I could definitely see her. I haven't indoctrinated her into role-playing games yet, but I could definitely see myself being loath to, gosh, wait, what do I do? And granted, she's 7, so I wouldn't want to necessarily kill her characters, but I'd have to figure out other ways to put them in jeopardy, I think. But that's it is a concern on kind of both sides of the screen. How do you handle character death? OSR tends to, you're sort of live it out on the sleeve with, hey, your characters are probably going to die, but still not everyone's into that. Elfbait says, yeah, not every spell in AD&D, the fireball, that was a mini lesson in the physics of fire. Right. No, and specifically, I got into somebody who was just super interested in trying to use floating disc for everything under the sun. And while I enjoyed some of the inventiveness, they were clearly trying to get multiple things out of it that didn't fit. Especially when you're thinking about, well, you're trying to replicate the effect of, say, a 5th level spell with your 1st level spell. And if they could do that, there wouldn't be that 5th level spell. So no, you're not getting that with floating disc. And I just end up having to keep writing these sort of legalese addendums. It will do this, but it won't do that. It will only reach these speeds. It will not, but it just speaks to the fact that we weren't playing 5th edition. This wasn't a 5th edition thing. This was a player and how they interact with the rules in a way differently than I'd been used to interacting with those rules. Because I'd never done that. I'd never sat there and tried to read those spells to find some exception to exploit. I just ran the spell the way I thought the spell's description said to run it. But I think at least 3rd edition, maybe even sooner, there was certainly and I know there was min-maxing prior to 3rd edition, but the idea of looking at the mechanics as mechanisms to be exploited for their gaps sort of became more of a thing. Ooh, Elfbait's got a story. True story. My little brother's first game of D&D was on his 10th birthday. I was DM and killed his character. He was upset. I got in trouble for mom. Yes, I think my wife would probably give me a talking to if I had something slaughter my 7-year-old daughter's, princess warrior character. But you got to make it fun. You got to know your audience. You got to know your players, and the players got to know you. Frederick Ork says, fun fact, when White Wolf finally went out and toured the USA in the early 90s to see how people played Vampire, they found many groups using GURPS or AD&D DMG to make sense of the game. I didn't know that. And I never played Vampire. It was one of those games that I kind of wanted to play, but I never got around to. But yeah, I mean, people made all kinds of mashups. Whole different discussion there. Well, that was kindling that magic feeling. You've got that magical feeling. Whoa, that magical feeling. All right, we spent probably way too much time on that. Already at 45 minutes. Look how time flies when you're waxing lyrical about magic feelings and D&D. Let's see what else we've got. Usage dice for magic. This is my pitch. Are we interested in that? I'm kind of vaguely familiar. I've read through the Black Hack some. Let's go check it out. Let's go see. This was posted by the Copa Copanis. Or they didn't put the, but I was thinking of the Copa Cabana. But this was posted by Copa Copanis. I'm actually surprised that didn't twist my tongue getting that out. Using the Black Hack's use dice, I assume they mean, does Black Hack call it use dice or usage dice? Oh, and Frederick Ork adds, going back to that White Wolf. White Wolf book assumed you would play Ars Magica. Oh, I see. Okay, well, that makes sense then. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why. They always make those assumptions, like the 3 Brown books saying, oh, if you just happen to have this other board game handy, just use that. Or, hey, you got chainmail? And I don't think they realized people are going to buy this game that don't have chainmail and don't have outdoor survival. Maybe you should account for that and not assume that they have, especially they have some totally different game by a totally different publisher. They're just going to have one of those on hand. Yeah, those weird things. Okay. Copa Capanis. Say it again without tripping. I'm on a roll. First, parenthetically, they say, I have yet to play test this, but it assumes you use a system with a fairly standard OSR spell list where the spells are rated from level 1 to 7+. Magic using classes get a use die, aka UD, to power their spell casting instead of the standard spell slot system. I call it Mojo. Starts at 1 UD4 at 1. What the heck does that mean? Oh, okay. So I think they probably could have introduced that a little better. I'm guessing they mean you get a D4 usage die at level 1. And increasing in size every odd level after that. So I don't know why they're putting a period after the 5, after the numbers here. A 5th level cleric would have, I don't need to use Mojo. Boy, they're just making this more confusing than it needs to be. A 5th level cleric would have a D8 magic die. I'm just going to call it a magic die, and so on. Non-spellcasters won't need it. When you cast a spell, instead of using a slot, you roll your magic die. But instead of depleting it on a 1 or 2, it depletes when you roll under or equal to the level of the spell you're casting. For example, if you cast a 4th level spell with your D12 magic die, it depletes to a D10 magic die if you roll 4 or less. So let's see. Equal or under the level of the spell. Okay. When your dice depletes to 0, you can no longer cast spells. It resets after a long rest, although there's plenty of potential playground here, tinkering with the recovery rate and frequency. I've done something similar, not exactly with, I have hero dice, which the players, different classes can use different things. It works on a similar level, except I'm using a dice pool. So you have multiple dice. I think my characters or my player characters, the characters of the players in my game, I think are at 2nd level. I want to say they have 5 dice now. And you're rolling to do stuff for spells, essentially using the cleric turning table, except it's relative to your level and the level of the spell. You lose your dice if you roll 5s or 6s. And then, but you have to roll above a certain level to have the spell fire. So I believe I'm doing this just from memory. Say you're a 1st level magic user, you're trying to cast a 1st level spell. I think you have to roll 8 because it's 7 plus the level of the spell. So you got to roll 8. You get to decide how many dice you want to roll. So you have at 4. I think at 1st level you have 4 dice. You have 4 dice. You need to roll an 8. Do you want to risk 2 dice and do it, or do you want to risk 3? You can risk all 4. You lose 5s or 6s. I did 5s or 6s. At first I was going to do 1s and 2s, but I thought, boy, aren't you getting kicked in the teeth for rolling poorly? I didn't like the double whammy of, hey, you've just rolled poorly and kind of your die roll stunk, and now on top of it you're going to lose your dice. So I kind of looked at it like at least in my mind, it was like you've done so well that you've kind of exerted yourself. It's that like, oh, I pushed myself really hard, exertion. The system kind of works for me, and I will write something up maybe more about it. Hey, Marcelo, nice to see you in the chat. I do like the idea of using the sort of usage dice or having the kind of hero dice, because I can give all the characters, all their classes, hero dice. And I find that having that for whatever they're using means that I can throw in a bunch of different abilities, but they're all going to deplete your dice. So even if I give a guy, I make a class and I say, you have 20 abilities, but you only have 4 usage dice, essentially, or I call them hero dice. So you may have all these abilities, which makes you super versatile, but you're still going to be limited because some powers will just eat up dice. Some powers, I call it risking dice. Like when you cast spells, you're risking dice. You may lose them, may not. And some of them you invest and you can get back if you're able to use your ability safely. So I have one guy's got a kind of a camouflage ability. If they use their camouflage and nobody spots them and nothing happens and they're not forced out, but they drop it themselves, they get the die back. So they can use that kind of over and over again. But if they get caught, they lose it. So I like these different ways they can interact together, but the dice themselves are a natural limiter to how much they can do. You might have a ton of powers, but you can't use them all because you only have so many dice. With something like this, I wouldn't use this just for magic. I would just give them essentially a same kind of thing, just a general usage die, and you can spend that die on different abilities, and that way you can have one system for everything. If you're the thief, or whatever the specialist, then you'd have that same thing for using your skills. If you're the cleric, same thing for doing your things. If you're the fighter, you could create some interesting abilities. Maybe it's just, hey, you can use this to add to your hit roll or to your damage roll or both. But if you do that, you run the same risks of your dice dropping down until you've essentially tired yourself out. So I think it's a really neat, interesting system. And I should probably write up more about things like that because I think they really can be really great ways for being able to create a universal system for working character abilities that don't add a lot of weight to your system, because either using like mine, a dice pool, or using a usage type die or a use die type system, you still only have to keep track of one thing and you can use it for everything, which means that if you want to make a fighter, thief, magic user, they can still just have one use die, and then they just have to split it between doing fighterly stuff, casting spells, or doing above and beyond supernatural thiefly stuff. And you don't need to track a whole bunch of things. You're just tracking that one die. And it's just that one die just measures their exertion until when they're at 0, they're just tapped out. My take. But it's not bad. I clean up the Copa Capanis, clean up the nomenclature a little bit. It's a little bit confusingly done. I mean, obviously, if it's just for your table, you don't need to do anything. But I feel like you've made it more complicated with the mojo and the UD, and just call it magic die. Just call it use die. All right, let me just read one comment. AJ Chafe said, I think usage die can be used for lots of cool stuff like this. I like your idea, but personally, I would do it this way. Each individual spell has a usage die. When you cast a spell, follow the usage die rules as normal. All spells start out at D4. I wouldn't do that. It's just a lot of bookkeeping. Goodness. I mean, specific slots for each spell, essentially, dice for each spell, that's more than I would want to do. Oh, John Lennon coming in. The problem with 5th edition and similar games today is that once combat starts, role-playing ends, it becomes just a skirmish game. I mean, it depends. I think I think there is some truth to that in terms of inheritance from 4th edition and how 4th edition had a very heavy skirmish style component once you got into combat, which a lot of people liked. It was a nice change. I certainly enjoyed some of the skirmish stuff. I do agree that but I don't think, I hesitate to think it's the rules, because one of the things I think with the move towards virtual battle maps is you start to concentrate on what's on the map and not using that imagination. And what I mean by that, and again, look, this is going to be horribly generalized. call it a straw man argument. I'm not trying to win in the court of law. This is really just my opinion and the kind of the way I see it. And it certainly affects me as much as anybody else. I'm not suggesting somehow that I'm above and beyond what I'm about to say. If I'm looking at a battle map, and I've seen them more in virtual spaces than in playing in physical person, physical games in a physical space. Mostly because even when someone's had battle maps, I've never seen somebody have super high quality battle maps. I've just never experienced that. Usually it was just using, a wet erase marker on one of those Chessex grids so that it was so kind of abstract. It didn't lead to the same problem. But you tend to look at a battle map, and instead of thinking about, if I set a fight in a tavern and we're playing Theater of the Mind, and I say, okay, you're in the tavern, all of a sudden the fight breaks out. I'm imagining all the stuff that's in a tavern, and I might start to ask questions. Okay, how many tables are there? All right, how many chairs are there? Is there a chandelier or lanterns? Is there a fire? Where's the bar? And I'm starting to try to fill in all the details in my brain. And I might ask questions of the GM where my details, I don't feel like I've been fleshed out. I just want to confirm. And there's a second floor. There's a balcony. If you think like a Western, I don't know, obviously the Western saloons have that upper floor that's got the really flimsy railing that, someone will inevitably get shot and then break the railing and fall down to the bottom floor, right? All that kind of stuff. If it's a battle map, I'm going to look at the battle map and I'm going to assume that if it's not on the battle map, it doesn't exist, as opposed to asking. I just think that is probably how most people approach battle maps. So I'm going to look and say, okay, I don't see any lanterns or candles or whatever. Okay, so I'm going to assume that they're not there. Or I don't see a balcony, so I'm going to assume it's not there. And it may not be there, or it may be, or I'm going to assume that, they didn't draw in hay on the floor, so that there's no hay there. Whatever it is, I'm going to assume those things. And I think that leads me less to thinking about the kind of solutions that are more imaginative. I'm going to end up just following the grids around the obstacles, if there are any, and going. I might be wrong on that, but that's what I've tended to think about that. But I don't think that you can't play 5th edition Theater of the Mind and have fun and have imaginative interactions. But I think that so often the focus tends to be on, let's get a battle map down and let's pull it up on Roll20, and that's become such a focus, even in in-person games now, where people get really cool flat screen TVs and they'll put a whole fancy digital battle map on their screen and play through that it just takes away from some of that what we would be using our imaginations for. But that's just what I think. Let's see. Dave Mills says it's designed as a skirmish game. And he also says you don't get XP for treasure or persuading people or exploration. Yes, this is certainly true. I would say, though, that you get XP for combat if you're playing an XP-driven game. You also get XP if you're in milestones for completing story goals. And you probably, I don't know if it's written. I'd have to pull up I don't have a player's handbook or DMG handy to pull up. So those are the two things. It's combat and story goals are the main drivers, or the only drivers, I think, by the book in the game. So that you're going to be driven to one of those two things: engaging in combat, engaging in story, or usually both. And let's face it, in D&D, they're pretty much combined together anyway. You were generally the end of any given scenario is a fight. That's just how they mostly go, and that's not even really new either. I'm not going to say, this is 5th edition. No, pretty much every right. You play a horror on the hill. The ultimate end of that module is fighting the dragon in the cave at the bottom. Spoilers. Sorry if to spoil you on that one. Dave Mills says story goals are buried in alternate rules. Okay, maybe milestones alternate rules too. I don't know. But that's just generalizing. I think that's where most people come to it. Either kind of milestones or XP, which both XP is in every monster set. Yeah, I'm not suggesting that XP for combat is not a thing. I'm just saying that I think that I just think there are two ways to do it, and they usually are combined anyway because the story tends to lead you from combat to combat. But yeah, of course, I would not suggest that. I'm just saying story goals in the form of milestones, which even if you want to go back to the rule books and say XP for combat is way more emphasized than milestones in the rules, in the community, I would say it's much more 50-50 milestones versus individual XP. Or I might even suggest, at least from the internet, and that can be misleading, but I don't have any other polling. I would probably say the milestones have the edge in actual usage from what I gather from the internet. And Frederick Work says, hey, there's always Pathfinder. There's always Pathfinder. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not the biggest fan of Pathfinder. Okay, man, I've already hit an hour. I can go a little bit more. Let's do a little bit. I feel like I only hit a couple of things this week. What's a good one? Oh, should we do a religion generator? All right, let's do this one because this might actually give us something. I like to try to hit things that are kind of gameable. So let's see. I'm going to post this in the chat. So you're welcome to follow along wherever you are. It's a religion generator posted on the Boxes Full of Boxes blog. And I know it doesn't translate very well to a caption, but there it is captioned on the video. I will try to break it out later for audio folks, though it probably doesn't matter that much. There it is. This was from Wednesday. In most D&D settings, the existence of the divine is usually a given. While I can think of a few exceptions, namely Dragonlance and Dark Sun, the rule is generally that clerics derive their abilities from patronage of a deity or from some sort of philosophical path. Though clerics are a standby of modern fantasy fiction, the number of beliefs and the ways in which they are followed can be endless. While most settings are focused upon gods, there are numerous alternatives in the form of animism or more abstract paths to spiritual well-being. Frederick Gork says the Lavender Hack has a nice balance of goals, skating, and money up to XP up. I'll have to check out the Lavender Hack. I don't know if it's you, Frederick, or other folks, but I've seen the Lavender Hack referenced a few times recently, which probably means I should put it on my queue. Let's see. Going back to the article. As a brief aside, while this general is fairly similar to my one focusing on cults, I think we might have covered that one, actually. I feel the distinction between the two is one of generalized acceptance by society at large. To use this generator, we're going to roll 48. Consult the relevant tables below. I have done my best not to hew too close to magical explanations. So we have a couple of D8 tables. Roll 4 dice, and I guess just read them in a row. First table, what sort of faith? Monotheism, polytheism, henotheism. All is of one nature and substance. Atheism, a path of enlightenment. Animism, syncretic. You're going to roll twice. First roll for that one is kind of outside presentation. The second roll is the truth. Second table is, what is their church like? Hostile to other faiths, insular, and passed only along family lines. It simply is. It's passive and proselytizing. It's secretive. It's based on blood, pain, and sacrifice. It's preoccupied with morbidity and death, and it's revealed through prophecy. Then we have the what's this? Basically, the third table. What kind of afterlife do they believe is awaiting them? Gloomy and gray, a paradise, much like their old existence. It's not important. Or the whatever the path ever after, it must be achieved. And then, how is the faith honored? Through word and deed, civic ceremonies, through I guess small groups led by charismatic individuals, austere faith, traditional household-led ceremonies. That's pretty cool. I don't have much to say here. I like these. They're kind of in the same pattern, design pattern, if you will, as the kind of worlds without tables. Let me make sure back in here. No one's commented. I'll leave them an upvote. All right, I think I can do one mo. one more. That was pretty quick. I dig it. Good job. I like all that stuff. I don't really have much to quibble about or anything. Let's see. OSR Low Life 2090 actual play. No. So we got that person posting a few times, gotten downvoted each time. Or I guess they posted two different ones. Don't bombard the subreddit. Don't bombard the Reddit with the multiples. Giving each of your posts a chance to breathe. You really posted those at basically the same time. Yeah, that's not cool. Faux pas. Faux pas, Steven Giannis 13. Conversion to other games. Like Naven Mothership, Land of Nod. What system could I use? I don't really know any of the answers to those. All right, let's see if on the next page. Community projects. A Hex. A review of Knock number 2. Meat Grinder, a new adventure for Mothership. A homebrew campaign map. Into the Odd Remastered is live on Kickstarter. I Envy the People of America. Okay, I don't know, boys. Am I coming up? It's got to be something good here. Come on. Gosh, page 3 is going to be third page. Is going to be this is it. This is where we're going to find it. Oh, here we go. A Land of Peace and Rot. Automated weird region generator. Yep, this is the stuff. All right, here we go. Posted to the Lizard Band Diaries. Got stuffed nose for some reason. All right, this was what did they call it? Some kind of weird region generator? Weird region generator. There we go. Follow along at your leisure. There it is posted in the chat. Oh, I got 13 folks in here now. Wow. Well, thanks, folks who joined me late. Better you're here late than not at all. While you're here, give a thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed and you'd like to subscribe, you think, boy, I love this stuff. How did I find you? Where can I learn more? Subscribe. Easy peasy. And I've also got Patreon and coffee if you'd like to contribute in other ways. This was posted on Monday, a few days ago. Who was it posted by? That other one, I didn't even look to see who had posted that. I really just come on, take some authorship. Okay, here it's at the bottom. Michael Raston. All right. Oh, it looks like they've got, these are interesting. I don't know. I guess they've used JavaScript to actually create some tables. Well, let's just see. All right, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. So they had another post, which they called How I Write Generators, which I'm not going to read, but they created a set of tables for an area generator as an example, and here they've automated them. Oh, okay. We should read that one instead. This post also includes an important person generator. I guess let's just see these generators first, and then if we like them, we can go back and check in. So we've got a bunch of generators. Important person generator A. I'm not sure what that means. It's kind of weird the way this is laid out. I don't know if this is because of something Blogspot forced them to do, but it's kind of funky with you're throwing me off with all these semicolons, man. Come on, pal. All right, let's just click on it. I don't know what's going to happen. My browser explodes and the stream ends in some kind of burning digital fire. We'll know why. Oh, before I hit the button, John Lennon says, I've watched a lot of live play Theater of the Mind, and it works the other way around. Players fixate on just the image in front of them. Have the GM encourage the players to develop the setting. Of course, it helps to have a system that assists with that, like Fate. Yeah, I mean, I think there's many ways to do it. I would hesitate to say, this is the one true way to do it. Certainly, systems that lean on having very upfront rules for collaborating with players on the setting. I try to encourage as much as possible players to ask questions and not assume because I don't mention it, it doesn't exist. but your miles are gonna vary. I do find that having the image, people fixate on the image, and so I've enjoyed and appreciated playing games where I do not put images in front of the players because it forces them to try to imagine it themselves. But that's just my experience. All right, here we go. I'm clicking on this. The stream goes kaplooey. Send help. A riverweed prophet. Okay. Building and street filled town. Then maybe this is not working correctly. I gotta think I'm missing something because these are cool things, but I'm just gonna sneak out here. You guys won't see it, but I'm just gonna open it in a different browser, in a Chrome window. I'm just curious if in Chrome I get the exact same look because it just looks weird to me. Nope, it's got the same layout. Well, there you go. I guess this is how they envision us interacting with this particular. All right. Well, I'm gonna go to how I write generators because doing it that way is just not working. How I write. Hopefully this won't be super long. I'm posting a link to this also in the chat. Here we go. Oh, I put 2 colons in there. Wait when that happens. So they were asked by someone else to do a post about their methods for creating random tables / generators. And first he says, why? Some quick thoughts. They help you think up things that you wouldn't think up otherwise. The process of rolling on a few random tables makes the thing you are generating come alive better in your brain. Using a generator makes the game interesting for the referee. This one's a little woo-woo, but in some ways I like generators as a divination tool. Yeah, I agree with those. I don't quite get the woo-woo part, but sure. On how I create generators, some more thoughts. They're always referring to, quote-unquote, an aspects table, which is their periodic table of their generators. Let's just take a look at that. So there's an aspect table. I guess they roll a d10 and a d4, and they cross-check it, and you get some aspects, ranging from good, peaceful, and kind to, at the whole other end, death, rot, and decay. That's interesting. And he's got a blog post about that, but you can get that from the chart. Bob Mosel says, I think I'm on a different page of his, and it's kind of like Mad Libs. Okay, that might be true. Let's see. So he's got some more thoughts. I'm going to skip there. So here are his thoughts on building a generator. These are kind of bullet point things, kind of an interesting way to lay this out. So generally, start with a base table. Whatever they're trying to make a generator for, they boil it down to its most basic component parts. From there, they add different tables to warp the baseline thing. For a monster, they want to know what its general shape is. There might be these 2 tables, perhaps the same list, but you roll twice and combine, giving you things like chicken plus tiger or snail plus elephant. This is weirder and more monstrous and has more details for your brain to play with than just chicken or tiger or snail or elephant. Then they like to know the aesthetics. What is unique visually? Sticking with the snail plus elephant, we might roll flame or ice or bones. Then we have snail plus elephant plus flame, for example. Finally, they want a table that goes beyond just a visual appearance. What does the monster want, or what does it do? The more details, the better. Well, to a point, you don't want the table too unwieldy for the details. Just overrule each other and make the whole thing collapse. Okay, so fiber. All right, so I guess what those other tables were. It's probably good that we read this one because now we can make sense because it is sort of taking various things and kind of plugging them together. So you end up with snail, elephant, flame, and then you're supposed to throw those together. Now we have some hero tables I think would come together and make a nice hex or area generator. Okay, so this, yes. So we get D10s. First we'd roll a D10. So his idea for making a nice hex or area generator would be using a D10 for the base area which includes the overall climate, region, or biome, right? So we have misty, cloud-capped mountains, huge, thunderous flowing river, thick, enveloping, luscious jungle, right, down through up to essentially a deadlands, lifeless trees, and refuse-filled rotland. Then for another table, we get an aesthetic, glorious clouds, rays of blessed sunlight, calming golden fogs, heavy rain, gray clouds, flooding, lightning, mud, encasement, overgrown things, warped, mutilated, wrong, bizarre, dust, sand, aged, ancient bones and fossils. And then we'd have another D10 that stocking it with kind of what's in the area, right? So we could have groups of people, a significant building or structure, beasts, significant vegetation, something unusual, nothing, and then a couple of things repeat, and you also get treasure. And then the atmosphere, another D10 from peaceful, at war, repeating, regrowing, ominous, tense, venerable, diseased, etc., etc. Then you might also roll for a base for the people. Could be religious orders, explorers, farmers, so on and so forth. A base for the structures. So I kind of like what he's getting at here, right? Where you kind of have these, and it seems like it would be one of these things that you'd want to do first. You set up all these base tables, and something like Abu Lafia, when it was up, this is kind of how it worked. It was Abu Lafia, which was a whole bunch of these automated tables that went from very basic stuff all the way up to really complex stuff that ran on kind of a wiki sort of engine. It had this stuff in, it was really, let me give the chef's kiss. It was really brilliant in how it worked, because you had all these, what you're calling base tables, kind of archetypal tables, but you could keep chaining them together. So you say, oh, a gem, and then you could roll on, and it was all automated for you. You could say, okay, now I have the gem table, I can roll on and get just a list, every gem that you might find in the Encyclopedia of Gems. You could also roll colors, any color, the whole crayon, 64 set and beyond rainbow of colors. And then if you could say, oh, does it have some kind of weirdness about it? And then you could have all kinds of weird things, and you could have weird things about colors, weird things about the shape of the gem, weird things about the gem itself. And you just chain all these things together till at the end of it, you got this really cool, totally unique gem. But then you could have that being, oh, it's a necklace of 8 gems. So you're rolling for all those 8 gems. And then maybe something about the necklace. So you could have this whole crazy stuff. And that's just one item. You can have really neat interactions. And this seems to be doing something similar. So you'd have a bunch of these bases, and you would build off the bases and chain them together. It's an interesting idea. Obviously, you're probably going to veer into getting weird results, but you could set up your tables accordingly to not do that. If you don't want a bunch of snail elephants or pine beetles or the like, then you could kind of noise what's on your tables, and you would tend not to get them. So you end up with a whole bunch of these bases, and you can chain them together. I like it. Tamaskas Bali said, hell yeah, love both parts of the post, the theory and the example. Yep, I agree. So this is cool. I'd like to bookmark this to come back to it. It'd be interesting to do some of this. I do appreciate his automated example, but it would have been nice to get a little bit more. So we could, I think what they mean is, because I was kind of thinking that you would hit one of these and it would generate all these for you. But here we go, his example of, right, so we went through, so we get the area generator, we have a base area, which is that Rotland. The aesthetics match up nicely. In this case, broken, destroyed, collapsed, ruined, crevices, cracks, so that's all good. There's nothing in it, which kind of makes sense. It's just sort of this deserted area. Frozen, things are held in place. Also could be very interesting. We could take it literally and say that it's iced over, but it could also be taken in a different way, that somehow it's held in place by some sort of stasis, which matches up with the stocking. Nothing is there because nothing can grow there because it's in stasis. What might be keeping it in stasis? Structure generator, a farm, and a fortress. So, so in that case, maybe there is some kind of walled farming complex. We get a base people, and then they're destroyers. I don't know why these just have colons. I feel like they should have done something more. Oh, and I guess there's a couple of these we could chain together. Nothing. Oh, frozen. So there you go. Pretty cool. The way this is laid out, it's a little bit too unwieldy for me. I kind of wish this would be a really cool thing that I would use if I didn't think that every time I pulled this up, I would have to spend as much time thinking about how I'm supposed to use this as to using it. Those semicolons with just nothing where I'm just supposed to guess. Oh, a jellyfish rotter. That's an important person. I think, isn't that more a beast? Porcupine, jellyfish. Look at that. We got jellyfish twice. But the concept is good. I really dig the concept. Just the execution and the way he's formatted these JavaScript buttons. It's not quite to my liking. I guess they've also done some free-form, free Kriegspiel type stuff. So cool. All right, folks. I think I'm gonna call it a stream. Before I go, programming notes yet again. The Logan's Run project starting up next week. So watch Logan's Run, take notes, bring those notes to the stream. Obviously, you don't need to watch it to take part, but it will be helpful. Keep me in check. Before you leave, you can give a thumbs up, subscribe if you feel like contributing to my efforts in other ways. I've got coffee, I've got Patreon, I've got channel memberships, all kinds of things out there for you. Guys, gals, everybody, have a great weekend. If you happen to be watching or listening to this later, then have a great whichever day, night, whenever it is. Game on, everybody. I'll talk to you later.